Even if we don't agree on the standards, we need to agree on our willingness to uphold the standards we agree to. So I don't think the problem like with murder is that someone murdered someone. I think the problem with murder is that not everyone agrees with the principles behind what would lead to the murder. So in other words, if someone embezzles money, that's a lack of integrity because they wouldn't want someone stealing money from them. That's pretty obvious. If you value money and you want to collect it by whatever means, then you clearly expect people to let you keep that money. You wouldn't, you know what I mean? Like, actually, you know what, just to be fair, if a thief values the thief's code, then that's fair. That's integrity.
Well, and that's true, right? Because that's where I think it gets interesting because life is about nuance. So I think there's a little bit of like a golden rule aspect to this of treat others the way you want to be treated. And what I always think about with that is like, but people might have different value systems, obviously, very much in the spirit of why I do the show. And the way I want to be treated might not be the way you want to be treated. So I may treat you a certain way that actually is consistent with me. And I am, exhibiting integrity, but there's still an issue there. There's still a conflict because your version of it is very different. How does that throw a wrench in the whole thing, or how does that fit in?
It doesn't throw a wrench in because it actually makes people more clear on like what conflict is. And then once you know what the conflict is, so like, I don't want to get specific to American politics, but I kind of need to illustrate this point, which is we often talk about like the problem in America is gun violence. And then I'll say something like, no, the problem is violence. Like, and then someone else will be like, no, the problem is unchecked aggression. And like, so and I don't disagree or agree with, well, I actually agree with all three. So it's kind of like a weird pipeline. But what I do know is that if we can't even agree on the conversation, then we're certainly not getting closer to a solution. We're getting further from it. So when I look at sorry, please.
No, I'm sorry to cut you. So there's like an efficiency play here, which is like, I think what you're getting at, which I get there eventually. If we all practice integrity, then all our cards are on the table. We know what we're dealing with, and then we could take the most logical, rational, pragmatic steps to address it. If people aren't acting in integrity, then we don't know what the hell's going on. I don't know what you believe or what I believe. You don't even know what you believe or I believe necessarily, right? So it's so much more inefficient for us to get to a better answer at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think some of this ties into too, like this fancy term, cultural relativism, which I think actually really does play into this a lot. My favorite example is you're not supposed to tell an indigenous tribe anywhere in the world what they can or can't do, yet you feel very violated when you hear about genital mutilation of young, like prepubescent females in like a tribe. And that like rankles feminists, it rankles misogynists. Like, I mean, both sides are kind of like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Meanwhile, like a person, again, to get back to this, I like to focus on murder because I think there's really like three types of murder. There's like a truly random kind, and then there's a murder of passion, which most Western governments recognize. We actually say like, oh, no, we're going to treat your trial differently. And then the third type of murder would be like the involuntary, like accidental, so like not, so a mass shooting event would be an example of like someone who's kind of like homicidal, and whether they planned it or premeditated or not premeditated, it's certainly not a crime of passion by the way I'm defining it. Whereas if someone steals from you and you go to their house and say, give me that back, and things escalate and you murder them, that to me is a murder of passion. Okay. And that would be because integrity didn't match up.
The integrity didn't match up. Well, let me go back to the cultural relativism for a second, because I think there's something interesting in that thread, and it probably applies to the murder one too, but it's just clicking in my mind a little bit more on like the genital mutilation, because I guess so you'll start to get like the spirit of the show. I love good ideas, and I think the way we understand good ideas and make them useful is we pressure test them, and so that's kind of the spirit of what I want to do. So is there an issue with the approach with integrity? Does it fall down because in the case of the genital mutilation, you could see somebody make an argument that says, well, if people in that culture are okay with it, then we can practice our own integrity. We don't have to like it, but if they like it, let them do their thing. But there becomes like this macro view of it of like, can we trust humanity? Like them saying they're okay with it, and I'm not saying they are okay with it or aren't, we're just using it as like the thought exercise. Yeah. Can we trust that they're okay with it? Did they have a fair chance to decide on their own what integrity actually meant for them? Or were they influenced by some greater force or society to think that they're okay with this, but they're not. And that's where somebody might say, well, now I have a right to step in and say, that's not okay. I have a right to tell somebody that their version of integrity doesn't work and they should change it. How do we think about that? Does that?
Yeah, no, great questions. I think I want to skip back like 7 points and just make one caveat, which is I think my plan with integrity is to reduce conflict, not eliminate it. And I think if I say that, it kind of like makes this conversation easier. This conversation is still valid, needs to be had, but at least like I sound more pragmatic and realistic to anyone
There's no
listening.
Like dream scenario where magically everybody's happy.
I mean, because of course I am a utopian ideologist who thinks like we can all love each other. And, I've went to Ecuador and tried plant medicine. So I've had my own like, spiritual backgrounds that have led me to being a almost 41-year-old who announces these things on a podcast. But I do think I'm moving in the right direction because I know that I'm more peaceful with conflict with this system. And that's something I really would beg people to consider, is that the world is as you are is a very like famous phrase. And it's really true. Like if you're in a bad mood, everyone's cutting you off. No one's letting you in. That store was closed because they hate you. We all get in these like very egomaniacal bad moods. And then other days you're like, the sky is open, the sun is up, everyone's, and like, but really the world is exactly the same. The pollution hasn't changed. The president's the same. The economy is roughly the same. It's one day to the next. So I think reducing your feelings of conflict comes with being integritous, because I don't know if that's a real word, but when you have integrity, go with it. When you act with an integrity, you feel a lot better about yourself, and you feel a lot better about like other people maybe taking the same leap of faith. And so again, you have checked this well with the whole thing of, well, what if their integrity just like sucks according to you, like a thief's integrity? That is certainly something you have to understand. But instead of saying they're wrong, they're bad, they shouldn't do that, you're just like, oh, that's their integrity. I'm not right or wrong, they're not right or wrong. And then you're at an impasse. And then what you do with that impasse is very like deeply personal, psychological, I believe, because I don't like to be controlled and I have issues with authority, that authority and control is the opposite solution that most people think it is. So I think
never going to get you to the optimal outcome through that route.